Hey Defenders, welcome back. So in the previous video, I introduced you guys to how we can use Shuffle to automate our phishing emails that we receive from internal users. However, in that video, we didn't touch on how to handle attachments. So attachments with emails and adding them to our Hive cases and being able to do some analysis on those attachments, where in this video, that is exactly what we are going to cover. For this demonstration, we're going to use an Office 365 email account. We're going to use Shuffle, the Hive, and Cortex. And the procedure that we're going to do is we are going to, again, configure our email inbox within Shuffle to be able to read emails that actually hit our inbox. We're then going to strip out the email contents, so similar to last video, and then we're actually going to create a subflow to handle the attachments. So this will be a little bit of an introduction to subflows and how we can incorporate those to be able to parse out data that's contained within lists. And that'll be a little more clear to you guys as we progress through this video. And then our final workflow will look something like this. So similar to the last video, however, you see we have added in our subflow, which again will be used to parse out lists that we receive from our Outlook node. And again, that'll be clear here in a sec. So let's go ahead and jump into it. And all right, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So I've actually already sent myself a email with an attachment of just an ICAR file, which should trigger some alerts whenever we do some analysis out to VirusTotal. And I've also created a subfolder called Phishing under my inbox. So in a real world use case, you know, your security team may have a subfolder where when users forward suspected phishing emails to you guys' email, they automatically get routed into a subfolder. And what we'll do is have our workflow actually read emails from that subfolder instead of going into the inbox itself. So in the previous video, we left off with this current workflow. And if you haven't checked out the previous video, I'll link it up in the top right of the corner right now. So make sure you go ahead and check that out before progressing with this one, or you guys may get a little lost. So just so you guys can start to understand kind of how this workflow works. But with this workflow, we're going to actually add the ability to analyze attachments. So we're going to start with our same Outlook web UI, right? And you notice for our folder name, I have now included our subfolder of /phishing. So if you guys have a subfolder with a different name, you would just, of course, correlate that to match your subfolder name. So, but to do that, you would just do inbox, and then / and then the name of your subfolder. And in my case, this is called phishing. We also left off last video without including our attachment data. So out of the box, the Outlook app comes bundled with these features already. So let's actually go ahead and set these guys to true. And then we're also going to upload the email and upload attachments to Shuffle itself. So if I actually go into the admin portal here and select files, you'll see some of my pre-tested files that I've already done. So we're actually able to strip out the attachments and also the email message itself. So if we want to then have our analysts maybe download this locally and do some more thorough inspection, that way we have the ability to do so. So we can actually store files within Shuffle, which is an awesome feature because then we can call these files within our workflows. But first, we need to tell our Outlook app that, hey, we actually want to upload these files to Shuffle. So I'm going to set all these guys to true here, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that off. And let's actually run through a workflow real quick, assuming that's still in red. Yep. And let's get an idea of how Outlook actually grabs the attachments and then kind of sends them back to Shuffle. So I've started my Webflow here, and once our Outlook one completes, well, we will actually see some attachment UIDs that Outlook actually sends back to us as part of our API call. So if I go ahead and parse this guy out here and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see 3 attachment UIDs. And then you also see our email file ID where I'm hovering over here. So this will correlate to our email.msg. And then we have our 3 other attachments where if we then refresh on this guy, you'll see my new attachments come in. So as part of my email, I have my Open Secure logo, which Outlook includes it as an attachment. And then also this Outlook horizontal, maybe that correlates to, I don't know, something within here. And then we also get our icar.zip file, and then also our email.msg, right? So we're also getting that stored. So we're now able to, so we see how our attachments are getting stripped out and returned to us via the Outlook app. However, this is a list, as you guys can see. This is a list of 3 items. And with Shuffle, it can be a little difficult. It can be a little difficult interpreting and parsing through lists as other nodes within your workflow actually call these items. So the best thing to do is actually create a subflow off of this. And what the subflow will be able to do is actually parse through this list and pass them as individual entries to the rest of our application, to the rest of the apps within our workflow here. So let's go ahead and actually look into that. And so I'm actually going to remove the arrow branch here because I don't want the create alert to fire right after Outlook. I actually want to trigger a subflow, which will then pass the data back to our create alert. So if we go into our triggers down here and then select our shuffle workflow, oh, looks like I already got one over. Let's actually now go ahead and connect to this guy, and then I'm going to say just get, I'm going to call it just get attachments, and then let's select a workflow to execute. And this can actually also be an app within the workflow itself. So we could stand up another workflow, another unique workflow that we pass this data to, but we can also pass that to other apps within the workflow. So for a select a workflow to execute, you'll see some of my other workflows here. Here I'm going to select my phishing emails, which is the one I'm currently on. And then for the start node, I'm going to select my create alert. And then you'll see our subflow creates a link to it. So then for our execution argument, what we actually want to do is pass our messages, all of our items within our messages block here. So you can see this is one item, and within this item are all these, you could maybe kind of think of it as like sub items within them, right? So what I'm going to do is actually refer to my Outlook app that just ran, dot messages, and then I want to grab the list that is in that field. So what that'll actually do is, so we have our Outlook underscore OWA, and then we say dot messages, and then we want to grab all of these other items through that. And this is a much better way of handling kind of loops and fields that have lists like our attachment UIDs, because ultimately this is what we're trying to grab, and we want to be able to grab these values to then ultimately upload them to our Hive cases that we get created. So we'll go ahead and save this off, and let's go ahead and give this a test run. So let's execute this, and then what we should see is we should see the Outlook successfully run, and then we should see our subflow start to kick off, and that'll actually start a new execution that we'll see here in a second. So you can see our get attachments subflow has been starting to run. And if I go to see other executions, and so we got some failures, which we'll clean up here in a sec, but let's actually see the execution argument. So if we look at our execution argument, you can see that we're getting our 3 items for our attachment files, right? And then we're also getting our file ID, which will be our email.msg that we'll also be able to upload as well. So the subflow looks to be working correctly, which is good. Now let's clean up the rest of the following apps. So we first create our alert. And actually what I want to do is I don't want to reference the Outlook app anymore. I actually want to reference the subflow. So I'll go ahead and actually remove this field here. And if we go back to our executions, under our execution arguments, let's create the incident reference that gets created. Actually, you can see from the last run, it was skipped because it's not in the start node. So saying that, so it wasn't able to actually read the value that was associated with that variable. So let's go ahead and pass it the message IDs. And so since this is now the execution argument, right, we're going to actually change our variables that we're calling throughout the rest of our apps. So for our create alert, instead of pointing to our Outlook, instead of pointing to like what we had here, our Outlook underscore OWA, referring to our Outlook app, I'm actually going to call the execution node, which will be our subflow. So I'm going to say exec, and then what I want to grab as my unique incident value will just be our message underscore ID. So let's go ahead and save that off, and let's give this a run. And I don't expect update alert or any of these other ones to work. We should just now have our create alert guy function correctly. So let me actually go ahead and remove the latest the latest alert, and we should actually now see the message ID correspond to our reference field here once this runs. So I'll delete that guy. Let's go ahead and kick this guy off. Make sure it's still in red. Okay, good. All right, and so our subflow has started. So if we go to our other executions, we now see our subflow starting, and we see our create alert has created an alert. And so let's go back to that. And now for our reference, we're actually getting the value that corresponds to the message ID that we get back from Outlook, right? So if we look at our execution arguments, here you can see our message ID value matches what we have set within the Hive. So that's looking good. So we are now able to create alerts off of our subflow that's starting to run, right? So now let's go ahead and update alert. And so I'm going to refer to our alert ID, which is created in the previous node, right, via our create alert. So if I actually just erase this and look to autocomplete, you'll see ID. And you notice we don't have the hashtag anymore now, right? Like what we had in the previous video. That's because now that our subflow is parsing through our list for us, we don't have to now filter for that. So field, I'll say description, and then data. We're actually going to do, I'll copy this out in the notepad, and then make our same changes. So I'm actually going to say execs. I'm going to, because we're calling the execution argument, which we're getting from our subflow starting. And then I'm going to also erase all the hashtags that we previously had as well. So let me remove that, remove that, remove that, remove that, and remove that. And let's change all these to exec. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy these values. And for my update alert within my data field here, I'm going to just paste that in. And let's save that off and now give that a test run. Let me make sure I don't have it. I removed it. Okay, good. And let's go ahead and kick this off. And so now we should create an alert, and then our update alert should function correctly now and actually add our description, which includes kind of some metadata around in terms of like who sent the email, who received it, and so on and so forth. So if we go to our subflow execution, that is now kicked off and is starting to run. Our update alert gave us a 200, so hopefully that's a good sign. And if we look at the preview, we see, okay, so our sender, our to and date did not get set. Okay, so let's look at why. Execution messages header from. So let's go back. Oh, let's actually look at our execution argument again. So I was following execution argument and then dot messages. Oh, actually, we can probably remove the dot messages, right? Because now we're just getting the body, the header, message ID. Yeah, okay, so we should have a header and then a header from. Okay, good. So we have that. So we'll need to change that. And then we should have a header to. Yeah, and info. I just sent this email again to myself, so I am the sender and the receiver. Okay, so let's actually strip that out as well. A little bit of live debugging here. And then I assume my date didn't get set either. No, it didn't. Okay, so let's also remove the messages there. The body content worked, and then the domains probably didn't work either, did it? No. So let's go ahead and remove that guy. All right, and let's try that again. So I'll go ahead and delete that case. Go to my update alert and paste these in. And let's save and run this guy again. And now we should see our subject, to, from, and date all be populated now, as well as the body contents. All right, so our subflow is starting to kick off, and we see that starting to kick off here. And okay, update alert ran, and let's see now. Okay, good. So now our sender is getting populated, our to, our content. This is a malicious attachment. Please subscribe. The date, and then the domain. So opensecurity.co. All right, so that's starting to look good. Now let's actually start to populate this with our attachments that we're stripping out, and some of the other data that we'd like to strip out, such as like the body URI and domains and stuff like that. So we have our update alert. Let's look at our add body URLs and clean this guy up. So again, I'm going to remove the hashtag there. Let's go ahead and strip out the body to clean this guy up. So I don't need the hashtag, and I don't need the messages, and I don't need to refer the Outlook app. We're actually going to call the execution argument. I'm going to say body.uri, and we can tell Shuffle to read the list of this value, because there may be more than one value within that data URI. So that looks good. We shouldn't need to change anything else there, so it looks good. And let's do the same for the add body domain. So we're going to remove the hashtag, and again, clean this up. So we should say exec, again referring to our execution argument, and then .body.domain. Okay, that looks good. So let's go ahead and save that and give this a test run. So I'll kick this off. We're making our call out to Outlook, which then starts our subflow, which then passes out the attachment, which then is able to parse through our attachments, and then we start the rest of our workflow after that. And so these came back as successes. So again, you can see our list coming into play, right? Because our body URI actually had a list of 2 items, right? If we see that here. So we see item 1, they're the same length, but they're the same URL, except this one I guess has a slash at the end that cleans that up, but that's fine. And then if we go into our case, our alert, we see our observable start to be added here. So that looks good. All right, now let's actually get to the fun stuff. Let's get to the attachments. Let's now add our attachments as files to our alert. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and delete our alert. And let's now add another Hive app here. So I'll say the Hive. And I'll progress, and I'll just link this guy here. And here I'll say add files. And let's now create, we actually have an action built for this, which is nice. So I have create alert file observable. So I'm going to select this action. And then our alert ID is, again, we're going to reference our create alert ID, which was created by this node here. We're going to give a tag of, I'm just going to say file. And then for our file data, what we want to grab is our execution argument and then the attachment UID. So I want to grab these fields here, which are being stored by Shuffle on the back end, right? So they're being stored here, but we want to now call them with our Hive app so we can actually add it to our case that's being created within the Hive. So for file data, I'm going to again reference my execution argument. I'm going to say dot, and then I'm going to specify my field, which if we look at our execution argument, it'll be attachment underscore dot UIDs. Then we're going to do a dot hashtag because this is a list of 3 items. So we want Shuffle to loop through these 3 items and add each of these 3 items to our alert. So I'll go say attachment underscore UIDs, and then a dot, and then a hashtag to say, hey, I want you to loop through this list of items. So let's go ahead and save that and give that a test run. And what we should see is we won't get our email.msg yet, but we'll get our other attachments, which should be these logos get attached. These logos get attached here, and then our icar underscore com.zip file should also get attached. So let's go ahead and run this guy. And now we should see some actual magic happen, and this is what you guys came to see. And if we look at our add files, we got a success of 3 items, so that's starting to look good. So if we go and open our alert, we now see our attachments come in as file types to our alert, which is awesome. So we see the open secure logo. I'm not sure what this horizontal.png is. And then we see our actual attachments, our icar underscore com.zip, which is great. So we're now able to add attachments that were received via emails actually to our alerts now, and then we're actually getting the content as well. So that's starting to look good. Now let's also add our email .msg file as well. So I'm actually gonna just create another app for that. Say the Hive, and I'll just pass it off after this one here. And I'll say add, I'll just call it MSG. And again, we're going to create alert file observable. We're referring to our alert ID for the tag. I'm just going to say MSG. You do need to, so it says required as false, but I found in some test running before I started recording, if you actually leave this blank, it'll gripe at you and it won't actually add it to the alert. So make sure you add a tag there. This tag can be whatever you want, but just with my testing, I found that it couldn't be left blank. And then for our file data, we're actually going to refer to, if we look at our execution argument, we're going to grab our email file ID. So we previously just grabbed our attachment UIDs, which grabs the attachments that were sent via the email, but now we want to grab the actual email itself, which will be that email.msg file. So I'm going to say email underscore file ID. So again, I'm going to reference my execution argument. I'm going to say dot, and then I'll say email underscore file ID, and let's go ahead and save and run that guy now. And now we should see our attachments be uploaded to our alert within the Hive, and then we should also see the email.msg file be uploaded as well, which we could download and actually open the email within like Outlook or whatever other tools you want to use to assess emails. So if we look at our subflow here, that looks good. Our add MSG looks like it came back as a success. So now if we look at the preview and import, you see our email.msg is now added to our alert as well. So that's starting to look good. So we're now getting our attachments, and we're also bringing the email itself into the Hive. Now let's actually create a case around this so we can run some observables against our files here. And all right, so our email is getting read. We're kicking it off to our subflow. And if we look at our subflow starting to execute, we should now get our alert created. Our case should be created. That's looking good. And then we're marking the email as read, which probably has failed, right? Yeah, so we'll clean that up here in a sec. And all right, let's actually now look at our case. And if we look at all of our observables here, we have now all of our files added, which is good. We're not getting our email.message though, which, because it looks like that happened before. Okay, so let me actually require that add message to go first. So I'm going to drag that there and connect that, and then let's re-kick this off so that we can ensure our email.message gets added to our alert before a case is created out of the alert. So let's go ahead and save that. And then I will run that again. So we re-kick that off. Now if we go into our newly created case, we go into our observables, and okay, good. Our email.msg is now being included. So I made sure to connect these so that we verify that our add email message happens before the case is created out of the alert. So that looks good. And then we of course mark the email as read, which this probably failed. because we have the hashtag here. Yep. Okay, good. So that's expected. But now we have our attachments uploaded to our case as files within the Hive. So what's really cool too is we can actually like look at these. We can actually select these guys and get hash values of these files. We could download the message from the Hive as well. So they download to a zip file, which are password protected with malware. And we can also, the best thing about this is we can actually run our analyzers against these. So let's actually run it against our iCar attachment, which came attached with my email, right? So go ahead and select that guy. I'll say run selected observable, and let's just say virus total. This should pop off a lot of alerts within virus total because iCars are testing your malware signatures. So, and then sure enough, virus total comes back and says, hey, this is crazy malicious. And we get our nice little report here. So that's looking really good. Let's finish the last piece of this, and let's just tell as part of the workflow to end it that I want you to read this email. I want you to set this email to read because I don't need to analyze it anymore. We've already created a case within the Hive and have stored it there. So I can now read that message, set that message as read to make room for the next message that comes into the inbox. So again, I'm going to do similar, strip out the hashtag and strip out that. And we're going to call exec.messageID. So go ahead and save that guy. And then this should be our final run of our workflow here. Back is does not exist. Let me verify real quick actually that that's what we want to grab. So it was saying it does not exist. Let me try specifying the folder name since this is actually within a subfolder. So I'll say inbox and then phishing. And let's save that and let's actually run that again and let's see. Maybe the last video it worked because inbox is just the default value there. So perhaps since I'm now within a subfolder, I need to specify that. So let's give that a shot. And all right, mark email as read came back as true. So if we go back to our inbox, sure enough, that is now in a red state, which is awesome. So now we've made room for the next email to come in. So looks like that's a little trick there. If you have a subfolder, if you're using a subfolder, you do need to specify that within the folder name so that the Outlook app knows which particular folder we are looking for to mark the email as read. So pretty cool. We are now able to handle attachments that come in with our emails. And so now if someone attaches, like an exe or something to an email that could be malicious, we can run our analysis against it, right? Very easily because now it's an observable. So now I can strip out so now that our attachments are being added, we can now analyze these guys against our various intelligence platforms using Cortex to be able to do all this, right? To be able to make this analysis, which is really awesome. And we now have a common place of storage for these emails. And if we want to extract these and bring them offline somewhere, we have the ability to do that. And these subflows are really powerful. Really, anything that you're trying to do within Shuffle that deals with a list, I highly recommend triggering a subflow so that Shuffle can correctly parse through all the items within that list, such as our attachment UIDs that we get back, right? So a really neat trick to use. There's a lot of use cases for subflows. Dealing with list is one of them, but subflows are very powerful, and hopefully this example helps open you guys' eyes up to kind of the possibilities that we can now start to do with Shuffle. Again, I will go ahead and export this workflow and upload it to the GitHub, which I'll link in the description below, so that you guys can actually import this and get started and follow along with the demo yourselves. So I think that wraps it up for today's video. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one.